Okay, welcome everybody. Let's call the committee of the whole for November the 10th, 2025 to order, please. Uh, Again, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held in our administrative center, which is located in the heart of the traditional territory of our friends, neighbors, and Treaty 8 partners of the Dene, Cree, and Dunizaw people of the Fort Nelson and the Prophet River First Nations. We recognize the rights provided by our treaty, and we also celebrate the contributions and enduring presence of the Métis people. Please be advised that this afternoon's meeting is available to the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. I see that Councillor Andrews is online, so we'll have to make sure that we're using our mics so he can hear us. Okay, are there any additions, Council, to this meeting? No. Staff? No. Okay, is there any public that wishes to comment in the gallery? No. We're all okay with the agenda the way it is? All right, so that brings us to Committee of the Whole Report 2225, which is an update on the reserves and surplus policy. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good to be with you again this evening. I'm presenting the amendments that we're proposing to the reserve and surplus policy that was approved for the very first time in 2018. When we brought the policy forward in 2018, we included operational items within the policy itself. And now that we're a number of years in, we'd like to be able to remove the operational pieces so that the policy itself can truly shine, and we can provide reporting opportunities within the policy so that the policy gains its strength from that. So what we have for you this evening is the first attachment is a copy of the reserve and surplus policy with the changes highlighted. And so some of it, we changed the word purpose to policy statement and background to objectives so that we could provide some consistency with our existing policies. And then when we get further into the policy itself, we identify the guiding principles, which remain unchanged. We get to a section of procedure. And in the existing policy, within that section, we identify every reserve fund that we intended to create in 2018, and we did subsequently create them in 2018. And since that time, we've had an additional discretionary reserve fund established for the Growing Communities Fund. So in terms of cleaning up this section of procedure and not cluttering it with the details, we refer back to those bylaws which establish those discretionary policies. The terms that are in this original policy and in the bylaws themselves are identical. So by removing them from the policy, we still have that original reference to the establishment of the reserve funds in the bylaws. Then as we go through after the discretional operating and capital reserves, we've taken pieces from throughout the existing policy and put it where it needs to be. So we made sure that we talked about the policy rationale for identifying minimums and optimal fund balances. So we have that section. We also have a section that identifies the annual, that the annual or periodic contributions to the discretionary reserves are approved through by council in our annual budget process, so that we clarify that for users that haven't seen this policy before. We remove the language around each and every one of the policies is what what I'm proposing. Then we get into the statutory reserve funds, which are those that are established in the legislation, the Local Government Act and or the Community Charter. So that section also, we're removing the two reference to the two funds. We get to the unappropriated surpluses, and in the original version, we had funds for operating sewer and water. And there was no longer a need for maintaining funds for sewer and water, and those have been removed over the last number of years. So we removed them from the update, but we also included here what the rationale is for having unappropriated surpluses. And we added the identified minimum and maximum, and that if the unappropriated surplus hits the maximum, then hits the optimal balance, then it would be transferred to the discretionary financial stabilization reserve. Just so that we can understand that unappropriated surpluses are basically what we're using to run government. That's what we need in the bank to be able to handle our obligations as we go along. So as I said, we've got some sections there that we removed the reference to the sewer and water unappropriated surpluses. And then the next section is the appropriated surpluses. So this is what we're calling reserve accounts. Again, in the original version, we identified those reserve accounts that would be established and what their purpose would be. The policy identifies that reserve accounts going forward are identified by resolution of council. So by listing some of the reserve accounts within the policy, we lose that ability to maintain a comprehensive list. By including administrative pieces, we lose the policy. So the suggestion is that we're removing those items from policy, recognizing that they exist, they were set up, and they all exist. And then a section for administration, where we've already talked about where reserve balance contributions are coming from and optimum balances. So here we're talking about internal borrowing abilities and the responsibilities of how these reserve funds are handled and how they're reported on. And so this section has been updated to identify that year-end balances and specific purposes of all the reserves and surpluses would be brought forward, along with recommendations at any point where we have perhaps a reserve fund or a reserve account that's not necessary anymore. So for instance, our Growing Communities Reserve Fund will cease to have any purpose once all of the funds within it are utilized. And we have established that in 2025, and perhaps if the fire hall purchase carries into 26, all of those funds will be fully utilized. When they are, we'll come back and we'll look for approval to dissolve that reserve fund, as it would no longer have a purpose at that point. And then we outline how the interest is allocated to the various reserve funds at the end of the year. And if you're following along with the existing policy as it was marked up, you'll see that page 8 of the 14 onward would no longer be necessary. The tables that are identifying all of those pieces are established elsewhere, as they should be, and wouldn't normally take up a position within the policy. any questions or comments on that part?
Anybody? Yep. Okay. I just want to ensure, because the bylaw wasn't included, right? And I don't think there was a link to the bylaw. But this entire table that talks about minimum maximums, why they're there, that's all established by bylaw.
Yes. Yes,
So
it
all of
is.
that, even though you're taking it out of the policy, it's still in bylaw. So I was confused by the portion of your, and maybe you can just clarify it for me. So in your report, under financial implications,
Mhm.
amendments to policy 5918 reserves and surplus ensure clear direction on the creation, dissolution, and management of reserve funds and reserve accounts. So that's not done, that's done by bylaw, not policy. So I'm confused in why we say that it's giving clear direction on the creation, dissolution, and management of the reserve funds and accounts. Removing the point in time details creates a directional document. So
Right.
I'm unclear on that wording. Does it just mean it's giving you direction on how to advise us?
So
Or is
what?
the policy creating reserves?
No, so your policy should only be about how we do it. And the existing policy speaks to how we do it as well as what's done. And where I have to sit and think is about someone who isn't familiar with our policy, picking it up and being able to get direction on what the policy direction of council is. So they would understand if they were looking to find reserve funds, that they would need to look for establishing bylaws. And that if there was a reference to a reserve account, they would need to be looking for authorizing resolutions of council, which have established those reserve accounts and the details surrounding them. Right? So what we're saying within the policy is, and it's giving anyone who needs to take a look at the policy a clearer direction. And it's not convoluted by other facts that really don't impact policy direction.
Right, but if they, I mean, if you don't list the accounts, let's just say the appropriated surplus and the reserve accounts, if they're not listed there, they gotta go look for them in the bylaw. Right?
Absolutely.
They'd have to go
So,
look, they'd have to pull the bylaw out and then have a look at
yeah,
it
yeah.
to determine what's already there and why they're there.
And supplementary to that, the policy indicates on an annual basis that all of them are reported on. So the continuity comes from that piece in order
Yeah.
to pull them forward each and every year.
Right, so that brings me to the next. You've segued into that, and that's the annual review. So essentially, you've given us a copy of what the annual review might look like in
Yes,
attachment 2, I think it was.
that's
So,
correct.
yeah. So it talks about how much is in there and sort of why it's there. And we review that every year. But it seems to me there needs to be a period of time where the bylaw itself gets reviewed by, whether it's once per council or every couple of years or even annually, where you're actually looking at the intent of the bylaw and the reserves themselves, because some councils might feel differently with respect to the mins and maxes and even why the minimums are what they are.
Yes.
Right. And it's pretty important, sorry. So it's pretty important because it's a substantial portion of the budget every year is what goes into reserve. Right. So the council of the day should be at least reviewing that on occasion. Okay, please. So
I
that's
just
your
wanted
same
to add
question?
to that
Yeah.
because I had a question around that too, and I really like the report on reserve funds and reserve accounts. And my question was, could we write in the policy or the bylaw, wherever it would be appropriate, that this report is presented to each council at budget time? So that
Yep.
the council of the day can reference how much is in each of the accounts.
Yeah, so just to address that, the first off, the intention of the policy is to provide an annual reporting. So I would envision that after the financial statements have been presented, council would be presented with a report from the Director of Finance similar to what I've presented in draft. So certainly that piece is there, and we can include that as a section within the budget package. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, if I
Because
may,
we are,
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
Finish your thought.
I just wanted to say, if I may, that we know we're looking at sustainable service levels, and we know that it's our service levels at this point and our renewal that we're projecting that identifies the amounts that are going into and out of reserve funds. So I can see that the reserve fund balances, the purposes, the mins and the maxes will potentially be viewed on a more consistent basis as we're talking about service levels. And I don't know if Scott wants to embellish on that, but I think it's going to play a very wholesome part of that whole process.
Yes, because that's why you need to talk about it at budget time, because actually when the budget is approved, you actually have already determined what you think should go in, what the amount should go into those reserves at budget time, which is actually in advance of, but then things happen, right? And you run the course of the year and you may not actually hit that target. And so you need a report after the year end and the books are finished and audited to say what actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So we will have at least 2 touch points at this moment. During the budget, we present a schedule that identifies where where last year's reserves were, the ins and outs and the balance, and then the projection of what we're presenting within the budget in terms of the amounts going in and coming out of, and what we anticipate the reserve balance to be at the end of that budget. So we do that piece already. It may not be highlighted to the point where we could, but it is included at the beginning of our budget package. Now, in addition, if we're coming forward and providing an individual report such as we've identified here, it gives a second touch point to council to understand what's in there.
Because in the budget, we're just presented with the reserve amount, like what was last year's and then what's projected for this year. But we're not necessarily provided with the breakdown as indicated in the report on reserve funds and reserve accounts.
So
we don't necessarily see that.
So in the binder, you'll have it'll actually outline each reserve account. And then it outlines, as Tony said, the closing value for the previous year. So in this case, you're doing a 25 budget. So you showed the closing amounts as of December 31st, 2024. Or it might have been 23 as of the financials. I can't remember.
24. No, we use 24.
And then it outlines what the contribution is to that account, because the
expected contribution.
The contributions are typically, I mean, that's the very first thing I went through with council, and their when council started was the various reserve funds
Yeah.
and the renewal program, and these what the annual contributions are, because typically the annual contributions remain the same annually. The only thing you're going to do over time is slowly creep up based on inflation unless council reduces the service levels.
Right.
And then it outlines what the projected ending balance of 25 is for each particular account or reserve fund, and the value that we obviously remove from that. And then the budget document, as you approve various areas, you're approving the contribution to that fund. And we also outline what projects are occurring that year and what value. So you have an idea. So roads, for example, say your contributions $2.2 million annually, and we're doing X amount of work this year. And sometimes certain projects are broken out into each fund. So 44th is an example. 44th had a significant portion come out of sewer. Others, some came out of roads, some came out of water, depending on the scope of work, right? But I think, I shouldn't say I think, the intent would be, and we're looking at actuals now, we were delayed with the actuals this year because the financials were delayed being presented to council. But the intent then would be to have that follow-up discussion. It's that second touch point to look at it and say, okay, this is what we intended to do. This is where it landed. And any discussions around what variances might be. Typically, the variances are linked more to if something occurred from a scope of work perspective. And if it was on budget.
Yeah, so back to my original question, which is we should be reviewing the bylaw on occasion. That's probably part of what we should be doing when you present as a section in the budget, the reserves. We should talk about each of them and determine whether it's adequate or not adequate, and maybe that comes out of the
Sustainable
service thing.
Because that's what
Once
dictates
it's
your
done.
value, right? That is, I mean, council can agree not to contribute, but
Right.
I mean, the numbers are a formula based on what's the capital plan or renewal plan look like over time, and then how do you contribute annually to maintain
Yeah.
that.
Asset management, I think is kind of simpler than operations, right? How much you're putting in as an aside for a
Yes,
rainy
it
day.
shows the peaks and valleys. They
Right.
take a value
Yeah.
over a certain amount of
Mhm.
time and just
Yeah.
divide it by the years, essentially.
Yeah.
And then you continually review to see where things are. right?
Yeah.
And that's why, when we do the sustainable service levels, it'll be broken out into the renewal component, which would be your asset management or your renewal program, in addition to the operational component to say this is what it costs to provide these services operationally, and then how do we fund them?
Yeah.
And the various different funding models. Right?
And
We
what's the
have-
reserve to keep them funded in the event that you have a bad year or whatever. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Those were the questions I had. You've got way more than me. Go ahead.
Okay, so mine is a little bit more specific, but under guiding principles, the way I read it, I didn't really read. I didn't really find anything in there along the lines of affordability. Like it says, reserve surplus goals need to be consistent with and supportive of realistic longer-term financial plans. I mean, maybe I could stretch that to mean affordability, but I think one of the guiding principles should be that this needs to be done in an affordable manner. Like it, because I mean, sorry, I'm not, if you're not understanding, it's like all well and good
Yeah.
to say that, we should be contributing X, Y, and Z to reserve funds. But if that's not affordable, then that's not
We
realistic,
might
right?
be able to hit that mark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, and I mean, it's just like that high level guiding principle as, we need to keep affordability in mind when developing the reserve funds. That
Okay.
makes sense? Yes, okay.
Yep.
And then,
Or at least give councils the option, right, to not.
I mean, we always have the option
Yeah.
not to contribute, but I think from my perspective, one of the guiding principles needs to be that, yes, it's great to plan for tomorrow, but it has to be an affordable plan too.
And I think when we go through the sustainable service levels, I think it's important as part of that process is to take the collective, the various documents that we have, because they kind of tie into one another, right?
Mhm.
Because that's where your sustainable service levels come into
Mhm.
play. Quite frankly, it's what services council want to provide at what level and how much you're willing to pay for it, right? And that's where the financial prudence comes in too, right? To say, you know, I mean, I've said it in the past, like we do very good when it comes to snow removal in the community. But we also spend quite a bit on snow removal. We attack snowflakes before they hit the ground sometimes, right? So I think similarly, it all plays a part. And I mean, Aaron was just pointing out, even in this policy where it says the municipality will strive to be proactive in terms of financial health and stability, that's C under guiding principles, 3C. That might be a spot where we add, that's a component and
Yeah.
blend in that,
I had that.
understand that financial prudence or affordability piece, because it all
Yeah.
goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I had that one starred that perhaps we could write some appropriate words in there.
Perfect.
Okay. And then my next little ticky there was under discretionary operating and capital reserve funds. So I understand that obviously there will be interest generated and that the interest that's generated will be assigned to the various reserve funds. But on what basis? Help me to understand how that will be assigned.
Absolutely. So the very last clause in the policy, and I'm looking at, it says page 7 of 14, is about interest. And so what we do at the end of the year is we take the total interest
36.
that we earn. Oh, yes, item number 36. We take the total amount of interest that we've earned during the year and we allocate it over all of our funds. So, and it's based on the balance in that reserve fund at the end of the previous year.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
It's safe to say it's prorated, essentially.
Rated.
Prorated based on the balance at the end of the previous year.
Perfect, thanks.
Yep.
And then my next question was under unappropriated surpluses, and it was like the mayor mentioned about the like what was the rationale for deciding 2 months and 5 months? So the minimum unappropriated surplus balance is 2 months of averaged operating expenditures, and the optimum unappropriated surplus balance is 5 months of averaged operating expenditures. What's the rationale for that?
So your rationale comes from a basic cash management principle, and that is that at the very least, you need at least 2 months worth of expenditures in the bank to be able to meet payroll and your expenses. We look at the 5-month limit for those periods of time when we have higher payments. So we're looking at periods of time there where we're paying out more for seasonal items than what we would previously, or it's a period of time before we have received all of the taxation. So we need to ensure that we are built up enough so that we can get through those periods of cash flow until the cash starts coming in again. If I think about it in my own simplistic way, it's about how do I manage to have enough cash in my bank after Christmas and New Year's takes place? Because I know my high spend months are going to be there, and I need to make sure going in, I have perhaps 5 months worth in my bank to be able to get me through those peaks and valleys. So that's really where we see that 2 month and 5 month number come from.
So is that based on our own internal discussions or is that best practice?
Generally I've seen it as a best practice. And it can be 5 months or 7 months on the outset. No less than 2 months, certainly.
Yeah.
On the lower end. And if we take a look at the report, our surplus amount is less than 2 million going into 2025. So we're not even at the minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what would that value be based on the 2025 budget, 5 months? That'd be like $16 million?
I think we're
20.
7 or 8 million on the top end, right?
On the
Because
top
we're
end.
looking at operating, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the operating bit, right?
Operating, yeah, operating funds, so. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for me.
Okay. Anybody else? I think you've answered our questions, Tony.
Wonderful. I'm so glad. Now, if I can recap, I see one change at this point, and that is including an affordable terminology within the guiding principles. Was there anything else
I
in
think
terms
just
of the
that
policy?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
just that the report that you bring at the end of at the end of the fiscal years, or
Mhm.
actually at the end of the books being
Yep.
done, comes forward to it's an operational issue, it comes forward to the budget package, right?
Yep.
And I think a more robust discussion probably on this policy and the bylaw that supports this policy at budget time. Okay. That's all I.
If I may add, I'm going to hazard a guess that as council on a regular basis sees a report similar to the one that's presented as a sample, that it's
Yeah.
going to generate those necessary discussions.
Okay.
So I
Thank
guess that
you.
was the other thing is that, that the report, the 2020, or the report on reserve funds and reserve accounts is presented along with the budget.
It's
Yes.
brought
That's
forward.
included, it's
Yeah.
brought forward in that
Again.
whole. package. Okay, great.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to the committee of the whole report 23-25. So the additional information we were looking for the site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. Director of Planning et al. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. This is a report that speaks to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for a site-specific amendment in the light industrial area. On July 7th, 2025, the owner of 4401 55th Street submitted an application for a site-specific zoning amendment, which, if approved, would allow a bulk fuel plant use to occur within the light industrial zone of the NRM zoning bylaw. The proposed amendment was given first and second readings by Regional Council on October the 14th. And a public notification process and public hearing was then held on October the 27th, which generated several comments from both council and the public. Following the public hearing, Regional Council requested additional information before consideration of the bylaw, which is included in the report in front of you. Further, on October 23rd, 2025, staff met with the applicant to review concerns raised by council. During that meeting, the applicant provided some background information on the site's history and outlined some proposed safety measures, and as well as spoke to some of the traffic related concerns that had been raised. The applicant also indicated at this meeting that the site design could accommodate both a bulk fuel plant and a card lock, so both could occur on the site concurrently. The analysis section of the report really provides information based on public's feedback as well as council's feedback and questions. There's information concerning the current zoning bylaw, parcel history, a summary of public comments, jurisdiction, public safety, and risk to infrastructure, traffic impacts, and integrity of the zoning process. At council's request, we could go through each section high level, or I will just leave it for council's discussion, whichever you prefer. There's a lot of information, so I don't want to sit here and just.
Yeah, I'm I'm fine with the report. But I know, there's a lot of discussion around this in the
Mhm.
community as well as, I think thoughts around the table.
Mhm.
There's pros and cons here that, you start talking about the integrity of the zoning process and people's eyes kind of they glaze over a little bit, right? Well,
That's the pivotal decision.
I know it is. I know it is. But try to explain it to jokey public,
For sure.
right? It's and an understanding, they see a piece of property that has been developed and they say, why not? And, it's not being used and so it's difficult to
Mhm.
take them through all of these but I think from my perspective, I understand it. I was particularly happy with the information that you provided me with respect to jurisdiction and who has jurisdiction with respect to safety.
Mhm.
It validates the discussions that I had prior to the public hearing about the first information that we had that the BC Safety Authority had
Technical
jurisdiction.
safety.
Yeah,
BC.
yeah. Technical Safety BC had jurisdiction. And then further to, well, if none of these if everybody has just a tiny piece and nobody has overall responsibility for this particular type of safety process, who does and what does that look like? So then it validates the discussion I had with other bulk plant operators who say, it's our company. It's the large petroleum producers of the world who say, we're going to take on the API specs, the American Petroleum Institute specs,
Mhm.
with respect to inspections and integrity of piping and bulk tank systems. They do those investigations or those inspections voluntarily because they don't want to be sued if somebody has a big, if there's a big spill or a fire. So they're doing it voluntarily. Somebody who's not a big company may not do that because it's voluntary, right? So it weighs on me about that bit of overall safety inspection for a site that's nobody has particular jurisdiction over. So thank you for digging into all of that. I think I came to grips with the traffic impacts, and so because the request is for bulk fuel, I talked to some of the bulk operators about, well, what would be the minimum amount of fuel that would have to go through there to make it profitable, right? And it's 10 million liters a year at the minimum, maybe 15 million liters a year. And so, well, how many trucks is that, right? At 50,000 per truck, it's pretty easy to figure out that's 200 trucks in the form of a 10 million a year and 300 trucks if it was 15 million a year of liters of fuel going through the site. So that's less than one a day when you think about it. So, so we know our traffic is set up to probably handle one truck a day. If it's at that, if it goes significantly higher than that, I mean, what's troubling for me is we don't have a proponent that's come forward and said, this is what we're going to use it for. Right? Like if it was a large, my experience has been with respect to these zoning changes is that a proponent comes forward with the existing landowner and they make a presentation to the council of the regional district and say, if this zoning bylaw goes through, here's what we're going to do with it. Right? They tell you what their plan is moving forward. We don't have anybody telling us what a plan is moving forward. And so it sort of behooves me a little bit to try to look at a crystal ball. So it means you have to take it to the maximum. You have to take it to the maximum of what might happen because the maximum potentially allowable, because we don't have a proponent telling us what it is that they might want. So that's a gap for me, but that's nothing you can provide to me, right? So.
No, but on that point, what I can say is right now, the limit of fuel that could be stored on that site is purely limited by the storage capacity of the tanks. So there is no definition, there's no limit in the BC Fire Code Oh, hello. That's my partner. You can sit up here if you like. There's no limit in the BC Fire Code around storage for a bulk fuel plant. There's no limit in our current zoning bylaw definition.
Right.
What is going to limit it is the infrastructure that's on site. So right now, the maximum you could have on that site would be 1.8 million liters.
If they didn't put any more tanks in.
If they don't put any more tanks in, but if they put more tanks in, there's a process, there's a building permit, there's BC Fire Code, there's all sorts of things that would have to be adhered to. But right now, all that's limiting the volume would be those tanks.
Can I just
Go ahead.
something? So, the report does indicate that Northern Rockies Fire Rescue, has said that should regional council approve the zoning amendment, they recommend limiting the total on-site fuel storage. Sorry, there's a bug that keeps flying around me. To an aggregate of 200,000 liters, consistent with the BC Fire Code provision for card lock operations. So
There's a limit in the BC Fire Code for fuel card locks.
but that's not necessarily a limit for the bulk fuel plant.
Correct.
So that confused me when we put that information in here. Because I'm going like, so are they saying that if we went ahead and approved this site or specific zoning, that they recommend that we keep that 200,000 liters?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay.
So the point I was trying to make with respect to the volumes was you don't have a bulk plant, so all you're doing is storing. You're rotating that product through there, trucks in, trucks out, and it referring to how many trucks, right, would come and go.
Yeah.
So it's not the storage necessarily that I'm worried about from the trucking perspective. It's the volumes going through there, which sets the number of trucks.
Yeah.
Is the point I was trying to make with respect to that. But yeah, so that was my issues around and I also like the fact that you put positive aspects and negative aspects in there, and the discussion around the integrity of the zoning, the zoning process and the zoning bylaw itself. So, it's difficult to talk to people about, if something was built and installed, and even if it was not zoned properly, but they went ahead and built it anyway, that they make, they're asking for permission in advance. Right? They're essentially asking forgiveness that they built it and now they want to use it. And so if it was really, really busy, whether it's busy or it's not busy, it was busy and they build stuff, they're not going to build it when it's not busy, but they build it when it's really busy. And then they just come and they ask for forgiveness. Well, we built this $2 million facility. You got to you can't run it down like that, I don't think. So that's weighing on my mind as well, is that portion of the zoning integrity where, people are asking to change something that they've built already, knowing, and if you look at the chronological order, that they knew that this was not ever to be intended to be used as a bulk plant. The chronological order of events that's here is pretty obvious to me that not only one council, but two councils, between 2004 and 2006. So there was the UFA's intent at the start, with all the information that's in the chronological sequence of events. There was a request to have a bulk plant that was clearly denied by the fire chief at the time, and all the paperwork, and ultimately authorized by the council as only being a card law. Then in 2006, UFA changed their tune and come back and said, "Oh no, we didn't put in the dispensing, the bulk station dispensing dock. That was going to come later, and we always have had approval to do that later." 2006, different council. That council refused it. So you've had two councils, not one, who have stuck to their guns with respect to this, saying, no, it never intended to have a bulk plant there. So that weighs on my mind that two councils before have said no to this. So, my mind is you feel where I'm going, with respect to my decision, but that's only me. You all have your own thoughts and how you receive this report to start determining, how you think you should vote when it comes to third reading. Go ahead.
I remember 2004 and 2006, and those were wonderful years in a lot of ways. It'd be fascinating from a volumes point of view to know the volumes of fuel that moved through that card lock. Far exceeding 20 million liters a year that went through the card lock. We have two card locks operating in the area right close by. That also, we don't actually, we're concentrating on this storage, but I don't know anybody who stores mountains of fuel ahead of sales. It's that one is hard to get your head around from a business point of view. I don't think that anyone would fill a whole bunch of and have 1.8 million liters of fuel sitting there if there wasn't a input and output, a flow going somewhere. It's pretty obvious that when we look at the fuel trucks going up and down the highway currently, without a doubt, there's a limited number of end users somewhere up the highway that are both our local fuel distributors and the ones that are coming directly out of Edmonton are hauling to at this point. So I too have a bit of a problem understanding who has a plan to move more fuel than is already moving through the community to end users that we don't see anywhere increasing in number at this point. So I can't help but see this as the positioning, trying to maintain this as or to upgrade or change the zoning to allow the transport of all we're really changing is instead of high volume fuel going through a card lock, you're changing high volume fuel going through a loading, unloading process in a bulk plant idea. I don't think that it changes the amount of fuel moving at all. But the thing is that what if we say no to it at all, then we are closing the potential of it for the future, the potential, because it will disappear. I don't think, like I'm fairly convinced just from my own business experience that had there been enough demand for another card lock in town, it was a good opportunity and it's been for sale for quite a while. And I think that I don't think that the demand for another card lock has been big enough for anyone to take that on as a card lock. If it was really valuable as a card lock only, one of our existing businesses local could have bought that in the last couple of years and added that to their fleet of distribution systems. So I'm not convinced that we have a safety issue from the fuel usage point of view, and certainly not from the traffic point of view. The traffic point of view, I remember 2004, and the logging was going full swing in that era. And the log trucks were almost many, a huge portion of them were fueling up at UFA. And the amount of traffic in this corner behind us here was quite, like, it was staggering. And so we couldn't, without having an industry of massive scale, we couldn't even begin to match the amount of traffic flow by turning that into a bulk plant as what we had before, not even close, not even a small percentage of it. So I kind of see the value in keeping that as a placeholder because someone has an idea. Somebody must have an idea that actually can create viability for that site. And then maybe like we've all been wishing for a renewal of industry in our region, maybe there will become a need in the next few years for another card lock. There's already one built. You don't have to build another one. And it's right there, very convenient for our community. So I am leaning toward, I really like the report too, by the way. The
Thank
fact that you gathered, it's like it jogs the memory when you read about all the different events and how it came to be, and the shock to the community as when it shut off, like just where'd it go? Like half of Fort Nelson had, not half, but I don't know what the percentage is. A huge part of Fort Nelson's traveling traffic was getting fuel from the UFA, including the Northern Rockies. And anyway, I don't think that the facility being there is a problem to us, because it wasn't a problem to us. And I get the zoning thing, the integrity of zoning. There's a reason why zoning exists. But I want one further comment, and that's to the council's previous refusal. You've got to remember that in a small community, who's who matters, and who's who in the fuel distribution world of 2000 and the 2000 till 2000 and whatever, that matters too in the decisions or recommendations that were made in that era. So I kind of think that I don't want to be the arbiter of who's who and who gets to succeed or not. I just see a facility that has real tangible potential if we have an improved economy, either here or in the Yukon Territory, in the mining world, or somewhere that requires an increased fuel movement. And I hate to see another facility disappear if we can simply open the door for, there might be, like you mentioned the concept of needing to plan for it to be right full, because we don't know who the component would be and don't know what they're doing. I think that we can surmise that it won't be right full unless there's something that really brings a new large scale first dollar economy in the industrial world. And so in that event, what a question that I have to consider, I was thinking about is there a way that when I read the safety, when I read who the organizations are responsible for safety and how difficult it is to nail down whose real responsibility it is, could we not, under a rezoned system, limit the volumes of fuel, but not limit the flow through of fuel? I don't know, it's a question.
So I have one question for you. Are your comments based on the fact that this would be a card lock or a bulk fuel?
It's not an either or. I'm saying the card lock exists and the bulk fuel capacity exists. And that's what we don't want to lose, the fact that it could be either or. Just like UFA started with the card lock in an era when there was a lot of traffic and a lot of usage, like many millions of liters of fuel sold there in a year. And so I'm not just, I'm talking about the facility in its entirety. A real shame to lose all of that.
Because the proponent told us that they never had more than 150,000 liters of fuel on that site. It's never been used. The storage has never been full.
No,
right? So that was part of the.
But ask them what the volume of fuel they moved through there in a year, and you're going to be surprised at how many millions of liters it was. And so it was, and this is what I mean. Like I can't ever see, I don't know of anyone who ever in our history has stored millions of liters on site, because there used to be trains coming and going. And now I don't see anyone trucking huge volumes of fuel ahead with unknown sales capacity farther down the line. Like that's risky business. So I can't see the need for 1.8 million. My understanding from the proponents talk to us was that the issue of course, was around capacity, storage capacity, and the need for the transfer. What is that valve system called?
Scully
Scully
load
system, in order to transfer from truck to tank and then back into tankers and away the tankers go. I understood that those were the 2 points of requirement for the zone change. Is that right?
Mhm.
So if they're not going to be using the 1.8 million liter capacity and are maybe gonna have a 500,000 in there at the most, and like that's 10 truckloads, are you going to? How many truckloads do you need?
But once it's
In storage?
bulk, it can be any amount.
It can be, but would it be?
I don't know.
So one of the things we are looking at, that the report speaks to as far as in the conclusion section, is we have reached out to legal for some advice on what administrative tools or measures we have that would be actually feasible as well as enforceable. As far as being able to, if council were interested in limiting the amount of fuel that could be stored on site at any given time, and that would be in line with the fire department's recommendation of if we would allow a card lock 200,000 liters of fuel to be stored, why wouldn't we allow that for a bulk fuel? So we're just looking at some options on, how we might be able to limit how much is actually stored on site at any given time without limiting flow through. But we're just waiting for that to come back from legal.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have one comment about that, and that is the report, says in the chronological sequence of events that in 2006, I forget the exact date, UFA came forward and said 150,000 is not enough for them to do what, it's not viable at 150,000.
Mhm.
So yeah, to limit them to 200,000 really is not helping them much. Go ahead, Kyle, I see your hand up.
Thank you. If I remember reading in the report, I think partially why they picked the location was there wasn't any other available heavy industrial across the river. So the location, I think, kind of made sense for the time. I see it allowing heavy industrial in our light industrial to be more of the issue. If we allow this to change to heavy industrial zoning, that opens it up to heavy industrial activity. And looking through what a bulk station is, I think we should just allow it in our M1. And then that alleviates all our issues.
Bulk is allowed in M1.
Or sorry, M2 in our light industrial.
Sorry, M1 is light industrial.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry, did I
currently
miss
not
that?
permitted in the M1.
I'm sorry.
It's permitted in M2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just, because at the time, if I'm following it right, like council did say no, but our light industrial and heavy industrial didn't designate whether or not you could or couldn't, and now it does. So if we just allowed a bulk station to run in our light industrial, that would allow this business to go through. It would alleviate the issues of competition. And I think as I'm reading through this, we would have to have some sort of rider providing that best practices for safety are being followed. I'm sure more discussion could follow.
Point of clarification to you, Councillor Andrews, is even now the M2 zoning at 295, there is blank space there not being used where it could be used. So you had said that it was full, there was no availability. Well, both sides of that track could be used for bulk service. So if we're just talking about the ones on the main drag there, but
No,
on the back side, yeah, so there is room, there is room, and there still is room. So to say that there's no room is not quite adequate. And then my next point, I guess, is if you allow bulk in the M1 zoning as well as the M2, where does that stop? How many people in the M1 potentially want to put a bulk station in? Yeah, well, there's 2 that we know of right now that potentially would want to do that. So now you got 3 bulk stations in town. Where does it end that if you change the light industrial that you give it to one, you give it to everyone? So how do you stop that?
I don't say we do, like these zonings and stuff, and like the council at the time, that was 20 years ago. We're in a way different time now. And when I was talking about unavailable space, it was when UFA built at their current location. We were booming, we
That's
were
correct.
bustling, and across the river was being very utilized.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll talk to, just for me, it comes down to zoning integrity for sure, having been involved in the OCP 2 separate times now. Yeah, protecting the zoning integrity is very, very important to me, but I also don't want to dismiss forward-looking opportunities. I think we still need the answer about the insurance rate that one of our residents brought up. And for me, it's change for one is change for all. So currently we have businesses that have written to us that said we set up our business in the M1 based on the rules of the day. So if we are going to change, we set up our business model on here. This is what we could do here. And we needed to move across the bridge if we wanted to do the other. And so that's what they did. So they set up their business based on the zoning of the day. So for me, that's a little bit problematic. I need to do some more thinking on that. So we have a business that has, you know, set up their model based on the zoning. Yeah, so and then for me, it's like if we're gonna change a site specific or allow activity in M1 that hasn't been allowed before, I think that could be a good solution. But then that means for all of the players, right? In there, so in the long term, how much, what would that mean? And like how much fuel would be being processed through there? And then my last point is the fire department now has a recommendation that it being limited to 200,000 liters. And so if we had a request to go over that, like, would we just ignore that recommendation? Or like, I'm not sure where council sits on that.
Any other comments with respect to the report? I think next steps is for third reading to come on the next council agenda. Yeah, well, so yeah, answers to, you want to just,
We want the answers to the question about before I have to make a decision is the insurance rate, right, question. And then they're looking for legal answers on if in fact we can limit the amount of storage. So I would like those questions answered before I'm called to make a decision.
so then the next committee of the whole for the answers? Do we know if we'll have the answers by then? Or I guess we'll work on them.
Yeah, look, we'll continue to work on it. We can, you know, I'm hopeful that legal will get back to us this week with we met with them and had a fairly good conversation at the end of last week. So they'll need a bit of time to pull together some options. The question around insurance should be fairly easy to get at least a few answers. But if council wishes a committee of the whole report prior to third reading, we can certainly pull that together as well.
Well, yeah, so we have to answer the question, so we don't want to have a big discussion at the time we're doing the third reading, right? That'll be on a regular council meeting, so it'll have to come forward to another committee of the whole. It could be that before the next, you know, if we're comfortable, if council is comfortable with the answers they receive at the next committee of the whole, then that same evening we could deal with third reading. Yeah, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
published as long,
Yeah.
the answers would be published on a Wednesday and we don't have to make the decision until the Monday. So
Right.
that gives us all enough time to
Yeah.
do further research, depending on what the answers are.
Right. And again, if there's more questions, if that drives more questions, we can always just not do through, yeah. Just table it. Okay.
Thank you.
Any last comments or questions? Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it. Okay, so there are no new business items and I think. Oh, sorry. Oh, oh, right. Sorry, I missed that completely. I'm sorry, Hillary. Do we have time? Yeah, I guess we have time.
Good evening. So council's aware, we threw our name into the hat for HGTV's Hometown Takeover Canada casting call. With the support of some people that you'll see on the video and people behind the scenes, we put together a compilation of community voices. The application included a written submission and some photos and then this video, and was really done with the intent of sharing a little bit about our community, our challenges, strengths, and it's not promotional, it's more humble and honest. And yeah, so I think Alicia can cue it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary.
We're a small community town in the northeastern corner of BC. Long before we were a major service center for the Alaskan Highway, this beautiful region was stewarded by Indigenous people for years.
Hi, my name is Mark Lucas. I'm principal of Fort Nelson Secondary School, home of the Huskies. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording this on the traditional lands of the Fort Nelson First Nation within Treaty 8.
My name is Christy there, and I was born and raised in Fort Nelson, British Columbia. Grew into the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. I've watched this town grow. I grew up for myself, but it grew me.
Growing up in Fort Nelson was awesome. This town used to be full of life when I was a kid. I think I had one of the best childhoods a kid could ask for around here.
I was born and raised right here in Fort Nelson, BC. My paternal grandparents originally moved here to work for West Coast Energy. My maternal great grandparents first called Fort Nelson home in the 1940s. Both raised their families here. They had one of the first sawmills and water hauling businesses, both which contributed to the early development of our sweet little town.
Well, I've been in Fort Nelson since 1979, moved away a few times like many people do, but there's been lots of change happen. I've seen the boom and I've seen the bust, and right now we are definitely in economic hard times.
What I love most about where I live here in Fort Nelson is the people, man. Like I said, I was born and raised here, like my heart is Fort Nelson. It's tough seeing a lot of these leave town. Like after high school, right? Industry's not the best here. And we do a lot of poor group of families that just make this town.
Well, the reason we're still here is we love the area. It's beautiful. You know, when you go north, you're back in the Northern Rockies, and it's the people.
It's been very challenging lately, and we're still here, and we're still resilient, and we want to stay.
When people ask what makes Fort Nelson special, two things come to mind right away. It's the people, and it's the fact that the Alaskan Highway, the famous Alaskan Highway, travels right through Fort Nelson.
We have a beautiful, beautiful scenic area in Fort Nelson, and it would be nice to take advantage of that by revitalizing an area in our downtown core.
One of the things that makes Fort Nelson unique is our isolation from other communities. On this sign, it says Steamboat, but that's no longer in existence. Watson Lake is over 500 kilometers north of us, and Fort St. John is our nearest community to the south, and it's over 400 kilometers away.
Fort Nelson is following under the Alaskan Highway in the heart of the Northern Rockies. We've seen more than a decade of economic decline in the region. We've seen businesses and industry close and leave. We've seen family and friends have to leave for work, and we need to rejuvenate our region. Unfortunately, we felt a massive impact with the loss of industry and in turn significant population decline. This has had a domino-like effect on our schools, clubs, programs, and our healthcare system, and of course, so much more.
We rely a lot on non-profits to step up and help the community, either food bank, dog rescue, animal rescue, or just as a community as a whole. Being part of the animal rescue in Fort Nelson, it opened my eyes a lot to see the struggle people are having not only to feed their family, but even to feed their families.
Anything that has to do with nonprofits, whether it's our museum or our theater or our literacy society. There's so much that could be done in our community. And I'm sitting right now in our beautiful recreation center that had it not been built when we were in one of our boom phases, we probably wouldn't be sitting in this beautiful area. We might be skating outside instead of in an inside arena.
Standing here at one of the intersections you would first arrive at if you were heading north to Alaska and you get to Fort Nelson. As you can tell, I'm at the site of an abandoned gas station. It's one of many of the derelict lots in Fort Nelson, right on our downtown streets that are visible reminders of our history serving the north and this big corner of the province.
No matter what happens, industry failed, wildfires, and evacuation, aging buildings that require constant upgrades for accessibility, staffing shortages, and rising costs that will everything, especially here in the north. We stick together and we come up with solutions.
We need help. I love my town, I love my home. I broke my neck in a car accident 8 years ago. I worked 20 years in the oil field. I've been to Alberta, I've been to Prince George, I've been to all over BC, I've been to Vancouver, I've been everywhere. Everybody tells me to go, and I live in a wheelchair, I'm in a power chair, and I am happy at home. I want to say, older people, you can do this. The resilience in these small communities is all it takes.
Participating in the town takeover may give us the opportunity to help rejuvenate our downtown core, some of our local businesses, and attract that investment that we need in the community.
Having this hometown makeover would be a real boon for Fort Nelson, for our economy, and especially for all of the nonprofit organizations who are bearing a hardship trying to offer as many programs as they can to our community, but their funding has been totally decimated because of the lack of tax space in our community now, and provincial government and federal government cutting grants.
So I think with us being where we are, what we're going through right now, we need all help we can. We're doing what we can as a community. We're not just individual. We have First Nations, Southwest, we have First Nations, Northwest. We're working together to do what we can, but we don't have all the answers. We need some support. We need some infusion to get everyone's hopes back up. This, who doesn't all live in Fort Nelson? Beautiful. Why would you not want to come here?
Want to invite you down to see our community, meet the friendliest people, experience the Aurora, and they have an opportunity to make a real impact on a remote community. I think it's been proven here in Fort Nelson that we are capable of wearing multiple hats in order to do whatever we need to do to keep our spirit. Our community has proven funds given a hand. We will use it to keep on doing it. Let us prove this to you too. That's how a community thrives, having opportunities to pull together. We would be thrilled if you chose Fort Nelson, BC for the next hometown table. We never need an invitation to come back because you'd always be welcome.
Nicely done. Nicely done. So that's been submitted. What's the process from here, Hillary?
Yes, so it was submitted on the deadline last week, and we were just waiting to hear back. There's not an estimated timeline. Keep you posted.
Okay, good job. Thank you very much.
Highlighting my street garage.
Okay, so this question answer period. Is anybody online that's interested in a question? Anybody in the gallery? Okay, then we are adjourned.